Today across America, there are lots of mixed emotions. Emotions of sadness, fear, shock, but there are also emotions of joy, trust, admiration, and anticipation. Last night, as we all watched in a nervous state while trying to remain positive and hopeful that the outcome will be in our favor, whatever that favor may be, leaving us in awe as the verdict was rendered. Hello and welcome to Diggin Deep with Diggz. And on today's show, we have several special guests: Damian Nunez, Clay Malone, Lance Wines, and Sam Gray. And we will be discussing post-election analysis. Stay tuned.
Bucka. Ha ha. You know the deal. This is me, though. Beats by Supremo for all of my people, Negroes and Latinos, and even the gringos.
Last night, Sam Gray and myself attended a watch party at the local town-run brewery, where we interviewed some of those in attendance and asked who they voted for and why, and how they felt about the numbers as they were coming in. Lance Wines is one of those people that we had a chance to interview. So let's take a moment and see what they had to say.
Who did you guys?
No judgment. I hope not judgment.
I'll start. I guess I voted for Gary Johnson.
Everybody has their likes and dislikes.
I voted for Hillary Clinton. Secretary Clinton is she's my homegirl.
So Hamid, tell me the reasoning behind your initiative.
It's just my party line, and 5% gets the Libertarian Party a little bit more recognition on a national scale. I think that's going to be good for the system.
Okay.
And I mean, I've always been a Clinton fan. I think that a lot of people were the fan of President Bill Clinton, but I know I was myself. But Secretary Clinton sort of leads towards a socialist democracy, similar to that in Europe or in Australia, and I think that we need that in the United States. We need to progress more towards that equality and that society first mindset. So.
Okay.
I voted for Hillary Clinton.
Who were you originally going
I originally was a Bernie fan, and I realized by voting for Hillary, his progressive platform will be carried on, and not so much if we voted for the other guy.
Donald Trump.
I actually voted for Jill Stein, and I'm gonna give you my reasoning. A lot of people say that your third party vote is a wasted vote. I don't think so. My reasoning and my position, I feel like, is it's not about so much the present time, it's more so the future. So when you vote third parties, say you have, like, for instance, 10,000 voters voted third party this election, the next election is 15,000. You're building on momentum, and in the future, these third party candidates have no, they have to be focused on. You can't, put them to the side.
I voted for Governor Gary Johnson, even though I understand the numbers coming in, he's definitely not going to win. Hillary Clinton most assuredly will win by a landslide, in my opinion, although I do believe that is crooked. The more money, the better when it comes to politics. But I did vote for Governor Gary Johnson because if a certain percentage is gained by a third or independent party, on the next four-year ballot for the next presidential election, we will actually have a third option.
I can't bring myself to vote for either candidate, and it's like, do you have and this is an analogy, do you have a murderer that kills 10 elderly women or a murderer who kills a baby? It's still murder regardless. And I think Jill Stein, I was a Bernie fan, and I think Jill Stein most adequately represents Bernie's views, which is in turn my views. So I know she wasn't going to win, but I couldn't bring myself to vote for either candidates. And especially being in West Virginia, they say your vote doesn't matter. In West Virginia, it almost doesn't matter in West Virginia because it's historically, we're not a swing state. So historically we always were Republican, so I felt like I had to exercise, if I was going to exercise my right to vote, that I had the privilege to do, I was going to vote for her. But I'm more conscious of my statewide and local officials. And I think that's the most important thing that we should think about when we're voting. Our senators, our sheriffs, our House of Delegates, and types of positions like that. When we go to the polling place, I think that's something that we should always keep in mind as well, not so much just the presidency.
So we have some that voted for Gary Johnson, some for Hillary, and one for Jill Stein. The Johnson and Stein votes were similar in their reasoning, hoping to achieve at least 5% to gain more recognition on a national scale. We also have two Hillary supporters, one of them being Lance Wines, who has always been a fan of Bill Clinton, and feels that Hillary leans more towards a socialist democracy, which would be good for our country. We have another Hillary supporter who was a Bernie supporter in the beginning and believes that Hillary would push some of the progressive platforms that Bernie stood on. So, Lance, could you explain to me the Johnson and Stein 5% goal that some of us were hoping to achieve?
Of course. So historically, the United States has been a two-party system. However, the first election of George Washington was a single party, and he was just the best choice. But since then, we've relied on the Republican Party and the Democratic Party to provide us with candidates to choose for the president. However, it is stated that if a third party can reach 5% of the popular vote, they will be recognized as a major political party within the United States system. So therefore, if they were to gain this 5% of the popular vote, they would be recognized as a major political party. They could receive federal funding for operations, and they would be allowed to have a candidate in all state and local elections as well, because they would actually be a major political party, similar to the Republican Party and the Democratic Party.
Thank you.
Of course.
And last night, Gary Johnson was able to receive 3% of the votes. How do you think that factored into the outcome of last night?
Well, I definitely don't blame the third-party candidates for the loss of Secretary Clinton, but I do believe that I had wished that the third-party candidates or their supporters would have sort of grouped together and gained momentum as a unit and backed the major political candidate that was more representative of their beliefs. But I'm proud of that 3% margin that he did gain, and I believe that that is a progress towards a multi-party system that we, I believe, desperately need at this point with the backlash of the two major candidates this year. So.
And Clay, if you don't mind me asking, who did you vote for?
I voted for Hillary Clinton.
And what was your reason behind that?
Well, I was a big Bernie supporter, and so initially I, like a lot of Bernie supporters, thought that Hillary was just horrible. Just didn't agree with what she stood for, and to be honest, I still don't think she's very trustworthy. But when given the choice between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, there wasn't a question in my mind for who should be leading the nation. Because I feel like, kids, they're always told, the president is the highest office. The greatest thing that you can strive for. It's like you could grow up to be president someday. And kind of the underlying message of that is with hard work, you can achieve anything you want. But I believe that Donald Trump didn't work to get this position. I believe that he spoke the loudest, and he appealed to people's basest fears and apprehensions, and gathered his support from that instead of his actual experience. So that's why I chose Clinton, because she apart from her experience, she actually stands for something.
Thank you. And Miss Gray, you had the honor of interviewing several people last night. What was the atmosphere at Town Run?
It was definitely very anxious, especially when the numbers started coming in. I think right from the jump, Trump got several key states that were swing states, and so I think that really made a lot of people nervous. They weren't expecting that. I think several polls from the beginning said that Hillary Clinton would win, and I think people really expected that. So when she didn't, and when the numbers started coming in and he was ahead, yeah, people were terrified. They were really concerned for the future. So it was intense.
And speaking from a personal standpoint, who and why did you vote?
I did vote, and I did vote for Donald Trump. I have several reasons as to why I did that. Personally, I just felt that he was a better choice for me personally. The great thing that I love about America is everyone has their own opinion, everyone has their own voice, and I respect everyone's opinion. I loved being able to be there last night and hear what people had to say and why they feel the way that they feel. But personally for me, I just feel like he was the better choice. I'm happy with the outcome. We'll see what happens in the next 4 years. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Thank you. And Mr. Nunez, my man, how are you feeling about last night?
Well, it wasn't the outcome that I expected, but I'm not, freaking out like some of my colleagues, around campus and stuff. I just think that everyone involved needs to kind of sit back and reflect. I mean, you don't see very many Trump supporters on campus. I'm not exactly sure what the mood is so much in that camp, with the exception of Samantha, who's been very, very civilized and, good about it, not gloating or anything. But with a lot of the Hillary supporters, I mean, it's just, crushing defeat the way they're feeling and talking about the future. There's a lot of, real, genuine concern, but then there's also anger. Like, I see a lot of people, angry at people that did third-party votes or protest votes, and I don't think that that's necessarily, a healthy outlook. Regardless of who you were voting for, you can't blame the other side for winning. You need to sit back and think, maybe what has my side or, the people that have been in office done to make these people feel this way, and try to see it from their point of view. Like, it's not my point of view, but I think we need to understand each other before we start pointing fingers. Because, I mean, regardless of what we do now, I mean, Trump's probably going to be president, so we need to keep ourselves together and keep trucking on.
And that leads me into my next question. Where do we go from here? What should we focus on besides the president-elect, as far as the Senate and the House goes?
Well, the Senate and the House, they both remain Republican. Before, with Obama in office, there was gridlock because, of course, anytime they passed something, he'd, veto it, or whenever he wanted some action taking, they wouldn't take action. Now, things are going to start going through Congress, I believe. Might not be things that everyone likes, but I think stuff will start to happen. As to, what they actually try to do, we'll just have to see, because, campaign promises, stuff like that doesn't always come down the pipe.
And Lance, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that regarding where we go from here, I think there are three main points that we should really focus on. I think that now more than ever, the government isn't necessarily representative of the population. I mean, again, for the second time in my lifetime, the popular vote, or the majority vote, is not the person who will be elected or selected as president of the United States. I mean, just with Al Gore and then President Bush, today we see it with Secretary Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. So when you don't have a government that is representative, you have to take other measures to have your voice be heard. And that is the issue. I mean, today, all sorts of power minorities, whether it be race, ethnicity, gender, sex, wage, nationality, or any person who feels, oppressed, they are not represented, and they will take to the streets. And that is what we have to do today. We have to become socially active, and we have to produce movements that will bring on success, similar to how it was in the 1960s. I also think that we have to look to the judicial branch for answers, because we have in almost every state, but especially on the federal level, that the executive branch and the legislative branch are Republican, are conservative. But we still have the opportunity to appoint or elect judges who will interpret the law and hopefully seek for more of an unbiased or unpartisan opinion, rather than having all three branches under one house. And with that being said, this is a major blow, in my opinion. In 1776, we stated that we did not want a one-party tyrant to rule us any longer. We wanted representative government. And today, with one party dominating all branches of government, we don't have a representative government. We have the exact thing that we were against when we formed this great country. And so we have to look to change within ourselves, because we can't be mad at these people who sought this job. They wanted the job for the power and for the money, just like anyone else would. But we have to look at the other 330 million people, either home or abroad, who this government represents. And that's where we begin. We begin with ourselves and move forward.
Thank you. Stay tuned. When we return, we will explain a little bit more in detail of how last night's outcome was not representative of the American people. Thank you. And we're back. So, Clay, could you explain to the people, how last night's verdict did not represent what the people wanted?
Well, I actually think I'd argue that it was representative of what the people wanted. The popular vote was extremely close, and even though Clinton came out on top, you look at the county maps of what districts voted red, what districts voted blue, and a lot of the popular districts, but like heavily populated districts, so big city areas, consistently voted blue even in red states, and rural areas voted red, which isn't anything new. But I think that a lot of liberals, we need to accept that this is representative of America. Because regardless of your opinions on Trump, you need to recognize that he was able to get these people behind him. So we need to recognize that this is a sentiment, like the things that he preaches are something that Americans believe in. And I think that's why, for me personally, today is haunting. Because my opinion is a lot of the people that voted for Trump, that were in his camp, they believed that America was broken and that he was the man that could fix it. But I don't think that America was broken. There are a lot of things that could be made better about this country, but we are the greatest country in the world. And saying that we're broken and then trying to fix it by selling us snake oil. I just don't think that that's necessarily the answer. I think that we should be searching out what's good in the country and making that better. And through that, the things that don't work as well will be elevated. So I think that it is representative of what this country is, but I think that it is perhaps misguided, at least in my opinion.
I think that we're kind of in a catch-22 here. I think that with this election, particularly, it was incredibly divided. I don't think that if someone who was voting for Trump and someone who was voting for Hillary Clinton, I don't think that they were really going to come to like a mutual terms, like a mutual standing ground. But I think that's exactly what we need to do. Like, we need to seek first to understand one another. Like Lance was saying earlier, I don't think that a lot of people feel represented, especially by Donald Trump, and I think that a lot of people didn't feel represented when that Barack Obama is president. And so, like he said, we need to seek first understand each other on a personal level, because it's we the people of the United States. And I think in order to form a more perfect nation, we need to seek first to understand one another and respect one another, regardless of our personal opinions. And I think that's what's going to drive this country forward and make us, and I do agree, I think that this is the greatest country in the world. And so, yeah, to move forward, I think that that's what we need to do. Seek first to understand each other, respect each other. It sounds cliche to say love each other, but you know what I mean? Where is hate getting us? So we'll see what happens.
And Lance?
Well, I'm definitely a very emotional and opinionated person, strong-willed as it may be. I do not believe that the United States is the greatest country on earth. I'm proud to wave my flag. I'm proud to be an American citizen, and I know the rights and privileges that come along with that. But, I mean, the fact that we are $15 trillion in debt to China and Japan, who have recently pulled out of major United States markets, the fact that we are continuing to drop in the international education arena, and the fact that we aren't necessarily as progressive as we say that we are. We're lacking, and we're not moving forward with this election. But I mean, I can understand where we're coming from saying that this is representative, because groups that have felt oppressed or suppressed, that maybe are not but feel that way, finally had a candidate who spoke to them, and they came out in hordes to vote. People who felt ostracized or villainized, or people who felt like this progression towards same-sex marriage or minority rights, and people who are threatened by the idea of losing their power on top, came out to vote so they can continue that dominance. So maybe that is representative of a large population. But I think that the issue with this representativeness is that we are accepting our basic desires, and that's the individual first. I mean, those votes are very egocentric. We're voting for the person who thinks that we will benefit most from the economy. We will benefit most from these healthcare policies. We will benefit most from whatever legislation is in place, where every other developed country on earth is sociocentric. What's best for a larger number of people? Because if everyone benefits, I'll benefit as well, instead of myself benefiting and hoping that everyone else can catch up. And that's the major difference here. That's why I supported Hillary Clinton. Because if everyone can have free health care, if I ever had cancer one day, I would have free health care. Instead of me acquiring more money so that if I'm sick, I can pay for it, where people who don't have money can't pay for it. But, I mean, I'm not going to blame people for putting themselves first. I'm just saying that we will see the benefits or the repercussions as we progress.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And you touched on the stock market. Mm-hmm. That leads to my next question, as far as last night, the Dow dropped 900 points. And you spoke a little bit about the peso also dropping. Could you elaborate?
Sure.
On what happened?
Of course. So this was a major platform for President-elect Donald Trump, that we would win in trade, and that the value of the United States dollar would increase, that we would cut ties with international and foreign businesses and industrialize parts of the United States that aren't urbanized yet. However, we exist in a very liberal international economy, where those who can are allowed to do so, and those who cannot simply do not participate. And the United States is at the top of that food chain. However, we rely on other countries and other markets for both means of production and labor. But the idea that we're going to cut ties with them and not feed them the products or not feed them the money has threatened other markets. And so last night, as they saw more states turn red, they decided to start pulling out of markets, which obviously caused a very steep drop in the stock market. The value of the United States dollar dropped. The value of other currency within the Western Hemisphere also dropped because these countries know what's going to happen to them. They know that they're going to lose our business and that they will not be representative in this global economy. And so they decided to cut their losses and leave. But unless you do so in a smooth manner, everyone's just out. And that's what we're seeing today. The United States stock market lost $1 trillion in 5 hours last night. But people were worried about who would give a victory speech in a different borough in New York City. But that's the media for you.
Any other thoughts on that? Damian Nunes? Okay. Well, I would like to hear you guys' final thoughts on Trump being elected before we close out.
Well, I'm just curious to see what happens.
What about you, Clay?
I think this is a really critical time in American history because at least in my lifetime, this is the most divided that I've ever seen the nation. So regardless of what end of the political spectrum we're on, we need to pull together because we have the ability to do something amazing, regardless of what leader is at the head of our nation. Because the basis of this nation is personal relationships with each other and personal freedoms. And if we can succeed in pushing that with each other, then I believe that that is going to make America a better place, regardless of, you know, who you think should be president.
Thank you.
So I guess my final thoughts, because I have so many, I'm going to cut this one down and say that I apologize. I think I'm going to go ahead and give an apology to anyone who doesn't feel representative. You know, I'm not going to take on the entire white man's burden by myself, but I do feel bad for people who have suffered and who will continue to suffer. And I am also worried about our international relations and global politics. But I just want everyone to know that while we do have an executive who is the representative of this country, our people are the shining beacon of hope. And I agree with that. The people of the United States are what makes this country fantastic and what gives us potential, not the people in charge.
Thank you. Ms. Gray?
My final thoughts. Well, I'm not disappointed because I voted for him, obviously. I don't think that he himself is a perfect representative of who I am and what I feel as a person, because I don't agree with anything or everything that he has said and done. However, I'm happy with who the people elected, and I am excited to see what will happen moving forward. I do agree with Clay. I think that we all need to come together as the people. So, yeah, those are my final thoughts.
Thank you. I would like to thank everyone for joining me today. Thanks. And thank you for tuning in. This is Deshaun Long reporting for The Picket. It's been real.